Hopefully by now you've seen our first two videos in our Bourbon Trail series where we took you to 15 different distilleries back in July of 2023. And at the end of the video, I told you I would share my tips for how I booked the Bourbon Trail adventure that we went on. If you are just starting out, it can seem really overwhelming. I know it was for me when I first started. So I'll try to give you some practical tips and information on how to make a Bourbon Trail itinerary for yourself. The first thing you want to think about is the dates you would like to go. Maybe you have a short window, time off from work, and you know when those dates are. Or maybe your year is wide open, you're retired, you can go whenever you'd like. So there's a couple of tips for how I would narrow down. So first of all, take into consideration any other trips you have planned, see kind of what season you might want to go in. I would definitely consider the weather because Kentucky gets very hot in the summer. When we were there in July, it was over 100 degrees. So if you're heat intolerant or that doesn't sound like fun to you, maybe don't go in July. It also gets really cold there in the winter. It snows in Kentucky. So if you don't want to be dragging your RV through the snow or dealing with frozen pipes, maybe you're not equipped for four-season camping, then you probably want to avoid those cold winter months as well. The other thing to think about is that most of the distilleries, if not all of the distilleries, do like holiday shutdowns and summer shutdowns. So they use that time to, repair equipment, retool things, give their employees a break. And so you're going to want to check kind of to see if the dates where you're going might be during the shutdown. We did encounter that a little bit in July, but we saw that most of them were either back online by then or did their summer shutdowns in August. But that's something you're going to want to check into the distilleries that you're really particularly interested in and see if that might affect your dates at all. The other thing is possibly you might want to avoid the Kentucky Derby. The way we like to travel is we like to avoid holidays and crowds as much as possible. So we try not to go on long or big trips on big school breaks or big holiday weekends. And that also helps you avoid, if they're shut down for a holiday. But just don't forget, it's not a holiday most places, but Derby week is going to be very, very busy around Louisville and some of the other surrounding areas. And the campgrounds will probably book up really quickly. And the distilleries that are open will probably be very crowded. The other thing is to think about how far in advance you need to book things. So again, campsites might book up if you're going during a busy summer camping period, and distilleries actually now, post-COVID, almost every single one of them require advanced reservations. So most of them open about 90 days or 3 months before their rolling reservation periods. And if you're looking at maybe 6 weeks from now, you may want to check and make sure those must-do distilleries have availability for tours. Otherwise, you could get locked out of some of those distillery tours. So the second part of planning your trip is to choose your distilleries. And for me, I started out with a couple of online resources. The first one was the Bourbon Trail Official Guide. So there's a book, the Bourbon Trail Passport, and it lists a whole bunch of participating distilleries. And so I used that. I used their website, which is really helpful. There are a lot of planning resources. There's entire itineraries already worked out for you. So I highly recommend making that kind of your first visit on the web to try to figure out your itinerary. The other thing that I did was there was no way we were going to be able to go to every single one of those distilleries in the passport book or on the official guide listing. So I read a lot of articles where other people had reviewed the tours, made, top 10 lists, things like that. And I looked for, me personally, I wanted to make sure that we would actually get to see the distilling process, that we would actually get to visit an active distillery that was doing something. And I was less interested in the kind of like bourbon experience with videos and things like that. Turns out I was totally wrong, but that was my kind of idea going in, is I wanted to see these active, real distilleries where you get to see the bottling line, you get to see the fermentation, and that was what I was really interested in. So if there's a particular part of the process that you're really interested in, I would research and see which of those distilleries actually lets you walk through that or lets you see that and get like a hands-on tour of. The other thing is to kind of map it out. If you're not going to be spending weeks or a month there, if you've got a short time, the distilleries are all over the place. They're not all in one city. They're not all in one, nice, neat little bubble. The Bourbon Trail guide helps you with that because it kind of shows you like the different areas of the Bourbon Trail. So you can maybe concentrate on one area, but even inside that area, they can be a couple hours drive apart. So you're gonna wanna map it out. What I did and I found really helpful is I mapped out, so Louisville, I mapped out Bardstown, and I mapped out Frankfurt, and then kind of made this triangle. And then there's some that are like halfway between, or halfway between here, or halfway between here. And then maybe there's some that are like south or east or west. So you can really like map it out and see what's feasible for you to get to, and then try to plan accordingly. The other thing I kind of already mentioned is check the website for ticket requirements. So most of them, like I said, it's 90 days or 3 months ahead. Some of them book up faster than others, of course. If there are any that are must hit for you, check those first and make sure you I actually set reminders in my iPhone app to say, go book this tour on this day. So I made sure I got the best choice of times, because sometimes, my itinerary was like, oh, we have to hit this one in the morning, or we have to hit this one in the afternoon. So just make sure you know the requirements ahead of time for those booking windows. If you're going, July I would say was kind of off peak. It's very, very hot, and I still had to book in advance. We watched people at every single distillery we went to be turned away because there were no more tickets for that day. So don't think you're just going to show up and be able to go on a tour. You might get lucky. They might have a cancellation, but generally you're going to have to book these in advance. So be familiar with those booking timelines. The final thing is, if you're going within 90 days, don't be discouraged. Like, you can still have a great time even if you can't get reservations. Almost every single, I think all of the ones we went to, even if they couldn't offer you a tour, they could offer you a tasting. So you can still go and see the grounds. You can still maybe window shop a little bit and see kind of, the publicly accessible areas. You can shop in the gift shop. You can get a tasting, sometimes like a seated or a guided tasting, not just like walking up to the bar. So there's still things to do and things to enjoy. So if you've only got time for a quick trip in a few weeks, you can still have a really great time. It's just not going to be the same experience that like we were showing you in the last two videos. So the third thing is particular to RVers, which is to book your campsites. Again, you're going to be booking those tours 90 days in advance, but you may need to book your campsite well in advance. There are not a whole lot. There are a lot of campsites, but if you want to be in the heart of the action, you're not going to have a whole lot of choices, and you're going to need to book those sooner, especially in like the spring break, early summer months, or the fall when the temperatures are getting cooler. You're really going to need to pay attention to what campsites are available when. The thing you're going to also want to decide is, do you want to find like one central location Maybe you want to book a campsite in Bardstown and then you just want to drive out from there, or book tours that drive you, and just kind of make a home base and park your RV once and set up and not have to move again. Or you can do what we did, and you can actually book a campsite near Louisville, and then you can book a campsite near Bardstown, and then you can book a campsite near Frankfurt, and then give yourself a couple of days in each place where you can hit all the distilleries that are in that kind of close range. And then you're only driving maybe an hour at the most, and then back. And then you also get a little bit more time to see those places outside of the distilleries. So because we were near Louisville at our first campsite, we were able to go see the Falls of the Ohio State Park, which if we had just taken a tour from Bardstown, we probably wouldn't have done. So I think it's kind of up to you. Just need to decide ahead and then book those campsites as far out as you can. We all know what it's like right now trying to book campsites. State parks book up really, really quickly. So you might end up at a private campground, but there are a lot of good options in the area. My other tip for booking your campgrounds is to make sure you're reading those campground reviews. Make sure you're checking the availability in advance before you kind of get your plan too solidified. I use a variety of different websites to check campground reviews, and I wish that I had heeded them a little bit more, because our campsite, my old Kentucky home state park, I was like, oh, how bad can it really be? But that was a pretty run down state park, to be honest. And I should have probably paid a little more attention to the reviews. It was fine because we were not spending very much time there. We literally just needed power and water and a place to sleep. But if the campsite and the campground experience is really important to you, I would definitely pay close attention and look across multiple review sites and make sure you're getting kind of a good cross-section and recent reviews. That was the other thing with my old Kentucky home, is that there were very few recent reviews. So, a review that's 5 years old for a campground can be wildly inaccurate. It may not paint the same picture that you get now, 5 years later. So definitely look across different sites, try to find relevant recent reviews if you possibly can. So the last thing in planning is to book your tours. So again, you're doing this about 90 days, 3 months ahead, and you're gonna need to come up with a plan of how many tours you can actually do in a day. Make sure that you build in time for driving. Make sure you build in time for eating. Make sure you're not doing too many in one day and expecting to be able to drive around. It is always going to take you longer than you think to get from one place to another. And, again, if you miss a tour, you might not have the ability to get on the next tour because it may be full. So I would definitely give yourself several hours buffer if you're having to drive between. I think the big exception is like downtown Louisville. There are several, all within a mile of each other, and you can pretty easily hit those kind of one after the other. The big caveat I will say is almost all of our tours ran over. Everywhere we went, they're on a schedule as much as they can be, but they still want to get through. And if, maybe somebody on your tour has lots of questions, or maybe there's something going on that holds you up, you're waiting on the group before you. So you need to leave a buffer. Don't try to book, this tour is only 45 minutes, we can have one at the next hour. Absolutely not. You need to give yourself a little bit of time, not just to walk from one to the other, but give yourself a buffer in case something goes over, in case you want to stay and do another tasting. Maybe you want to shop in the gift shop. Maybe you want to buy something. Just give yourself plenty of time. So what we did downtown is we did 3 on the Whiskey Row, and we did 12, 2, and 4 p.m. And that worked out really well. We actually had time between each one we ran and got lunch. We could, sit at the bar and have a cocktail, or, go get a Diet Coke if you wanted. Plenty of time to walk between and not be, in a rush. So I think that every 2-hour increment on Whiskey Row was definitely the way to go. So if you're like us and you are going in the heat of the summer, I highly recommend booking the first tour of the day in the early morning. Even if it means you have to get up super early, drive over, those early morning tours were the best because we weren't hot, we weren't sweaty, we weren't, worrying about the heat and our, exhaustion. We just got to walk around these gorgeous campuses and really listen to the tour and absorb everything. And if you saw in our last video, there were some that we did in the afternoons and the heat builds all day, and certain parts of the tour were closed by the time we got there because the afternoon temperature, the actual temperature was over 100 degrees, and the feels like up in the top of a warehouse was 120 plus. So we actually missed out on a couple of things because we did, a later in the day tour. So, any of them that you look at that are going to have a lot of walking, a lot of outdoor, I would recommend booking those first thing in the morning. The ones that come to mind are Maker's Mark, although that is a very nice campus with lots of trees and lots of shade, and you're going in and out of buildings, so you have plenty of time to kind of cool off inside. That one does have a lot of walking, and so if it's 100 degrees, even in the shade, it's going to be hot. You might want to do that one in the morning like we did. And I think the other ones were Woodford Reserve. That one also had a lot of walking, really large campus there. And Four Roses was an outside. We did the sip and stroll because they were shut down, but that one is also a pretty large area that you walk around. There were a few others, but like at Jim Beam, they bus you. So you don't have to do quite as much walking. You're just going to the air-conditioned bus and they drive you around. So that one, you actually might be okay to do that one in the afternoon. But yeah, I think, just be aware of the weather. So if you're going to go in the winter, maybe you don't want to do those early morning ones because it's going to be colder in the morning. So you may want to save the outside tours for the afternoon, but just, be thinking about those things as you're booking your tours and tour times. And finally, we really paced ourselves. We had 4 adults for a lot of our tours, and we didn't have to worry too much about over consuming and then getting in the car and driving. But if you have a smaller party and you don't have somebody who's going to be your designated driver, I would also highly recommend looking into a tour, like a full service tour that takes you from place to place to place, maybe picks you up at your campground or picks you up at a nearby hotel and takes you all around so that they can do the driving and you can enjoy yourself. There are a lot of resources, again, back on the Kentucky Bourbon Trail website. There's actually links right there to tours that do just that. So definitely recommend looking into that. The other thing, that we did is we just booked 1 in the morning. We had lunch. A lot of the distilleries have an on-site restaurant. So you can very easily do a tour and then sit and have lunch and maybe just drink a sweet tea. And then you're fine to drive, an hour and a half later. But definitely, keep that in mind. You want to be responsible and you want to have a plan so that you don't end up, an hour from your campsite with nobody able to drive. So just, be smart, be responsible, and plan ahead. We have one final video in our Bourbon Trail Adventure series where we are going to rank all of the distilleries that we went to. So make sure you like and subscribe and stay tuned for the next video.